How's it going, everyone? So, yeah, I hope everyone's doing well. Again, this is Michael Hatsis coming at you live with Garnish music production. We got a beautiful sunny day in Brooklyn. I think it got up to about 50 degrees, so I'm in a good mood and happy to be here with all of you. And yeah, so let me just talk about what we're gonna get into today. So what we want to get into, what's up? All right, so let's jump into it. Again, happy to be here today with all of you. And yeah, what I wanted to get into today is to talk about a couple different effects. All right, I want to talk about reverb and delay. All right, so basically spatial effects. All right, and there's a bunch of different reasons to really get good at spatial effects, and you know, just to add these things in there. Okay, so again, spatial effects is things that give sounds a sense of space, dimension, that sort of thing, right? So the top two on the list are reverb, delay, right? And then you could throw other ones in there like chorus, ensembles, you know, these kind of things. All right, but today we're going to stick with reverb, delay. And specifically, the first thing we're going to get into is the convolution reverb that comes with Max for Live. All right, so let me just show you where you can find this thing, and then we'll talk more about, you know, what it does, how it works. We'll go over the ins and outs of this lovely device. So if you're on Live 10 or 11, you want to go to Packs, and again, I have it installed, so you'll see it under installed. But if not, you want to go to this right here, available, and you should see it in there. You can even just click Packs, do a search, and it'll come up. Okay, and just click that, the convolution reverb, let it install, and you know, everything should be good. It'll prompt you when it's finished installing. All right, so cool. So let's just talk about reverb, what it is, that sort of thing. Okay, so why use reverb? Okay, and why is it important to know how to use reverb, right? I mean, the thing is, every preset that we load up pretty much has reverb on it, right? Like everyone's using Serum or Massive or something, or Silent, And, you know, these things have built-in reverbs and, you know, it sounds good. But again, if we could really get good with reverb, you know, we could really create a really nice sense of space and dimension that complements the other sounds in the song we're working on. Okay, so again, you're gonna load up stuff. It's gonna have some reverb on it. Me, first thing I do, I turn the reverb off on the preset because it's always some kind of over-the-top setting. Okay, and then I kind of go in and just set up the reverb to my liking, to something that fits the song, right? So again, just by being good at reverb, knowing the different controls, how it works, that sort of thing, we could customize it to fit nicely in the song, okay? And give that sound a sense of space that makes sense with other sounds, okay? So again, what's the benefit of using something like reverb, delay, that sort of thing, right? Again, it just gives things a sense of space, right? I always equate these things to if you're looking at a photograph, okay? You know, there's shadows, or maybe a painting, there's going to be shadows, and it really helps create a sense of space and just to see where people are in terms of depth, right? Are they in the front? Are they in the back? And a lot of this stuff you could tell by things like the shadow and, you know, other things like blur, and then, you know, darkening of different things. You know, the darker would be in the back, the brighter would be up front, but that's a whole different thing. We're not going to really get into mixing reverb. We're just going to kind of get into, you know, adding reverb as an effect, that sort of thing. And basically how the convolution reverb works, okay? We could do the mixing stuff with reverb another time. Let me know if it's something you're into. You know, put it in the comments, something like that. Speaking of which, let's just check out the comments, see if we got anything going on here. All right, so cool. So hopefully by this time you have the convolution reverb set up, and we're just gonna go in there and right, we got the convolution reverb and the convolution reverb pro. Okay, so I'm gonna go with the pro because it has so many more controls. Let's take a look at both of them. All right, so we got this right here. Let me just pop it on this track. All right, another thing to talk about with reverb is that, you know, things sound very flat when they don't have reverb. It just sounds very like one-dimensional and very artificial, okay? I like to equate that to, you ever see people like on YouTube with a green screen? They'll have like a background and then they're just on a green screen and it just kind of looks weird. There's no shadow, there's no space. It's just this person with one kind of lighting, and then, you know, the background could be whatever with a different kind of lighting, right? So it's just like something's a little off, right? It doesn't make too much sense. And again, it kind of gives it this sense of not being realistic, being more artificial. Okay, so anyway, hopefully with this we'll get you all sorted out with the ins and outs of this beautiful device. And yeah, so here is the convolution reverb, and here is the convolution reverb pro. Letting it load up. All right, so as you can see here, the convolution reverb just has the you know, the impulse response. We'll get into that, and then that's it. The pro has all the fancy stuff, right? And you know, we're very fancy people, so we want all the fancy stuff because again, you can manipulate the sound further with all these different controls, and that's what we're gonna go over. All right, so we're gonna stick with the pro, okay, for this exercise, right? So what is a convolution reverb? Okay, so convolution reverb, well, let's back up a little bit. So basically you have two types of reverbs. Okay, you have what's called an algorithmic reverb, okay, which is just a lot of processing power, mathematics, things like that, where they just kind of, you know, engineer a reverberant sound or reverb sound, you know, with math, physics, whatever, all that fancy stuff. And yeah, and don't get me wrong, algorithmic reverbs are awesome as well, okay? But I just personally like this convolution reverb. It just has some really awesome controls. I think that's the beauty of it. With the controls, you could just dial in. All right, so this one is just kind of like algorithmic. It just generates a reverb, okay, and that's an algorithmic reverb, okay. And then we have the convolution reverb, which has these things called impulses, right? An impulse is basically just a sample, right? Anytime someone makes some new technology, they got to give things fancy names, right? Just to help sell. Oh, we got these impulses in here. Oh, what is, oh, that sounds interesting, right? Impulse sounds a lot more interesting than a sample. Oh, it's a sample of a reverb. But basically that's what it is. Impulse is just a sample of a reverb, okay? And you could see the different categories here and all of the different impulses or samples in that category. All right, so basically what these people do is they go to some kind of a place, right? Like, let's see, real places. All right, so they'll go to St. Patrick's Church, okay? Make sure that, well, maybe there are people in there. I don't know. It depends on what they're trying to get. Okay, and they'll get in there. They'll set up a bunch of mics, and then they'll have like a starter pistol, or they'll shoot off like a sine wave sweep, okay? And they'll record the sound of the space with, you know, the sine wave sweep or the starter pistol, right? So now at this point you have sine wave sweep with the reverb of the space, okay? And then you have the original sample, right? So you have sine wave sample with reverb of a real space, and then you have sine wave sample that's very dry, nothing attached to it, okay? And then what they do is, it's a little bit more complicated, but they'll just subtract one from the other, and then they're just left with the reverb, okay? There's a bit more to it, but we'll just stick with that, okay? And then they take that sample and they toss it into the reverb. And then basically what the reverb does, or this device does, is it actually just kind of like laces, again, it's more than that, but it just kind of intertwines or laces the reverb into the sound, okay? Pretty cool stuff, yeah? Now, so like I just have this folder of different convolutions, okay? And just to give you an idea of what these things sound like, right? It's just, again, like a starter pistol. You know what? I'm not sure if y'all can hear that because of it's going through the headphones or whatever. All right, but again, just to give you an idea of what these things sound like. Oh. So, right, it just sounds like a gun, or, you know, a gentle gun, and then a reverb at the end of it, okay? And then again, what we do is throw it in there, and it just kind of generates this, interlaces the reverb onto the sound. All right, so that's a basic idea of what it does. Okay, so now let's just check out the song I have here. I did a remix. It's like a moombahton kind of thing, and yeah, let's just check it out, and then we'll just add some reverbs. I went back and I took all the reverbs off, or most of the reverbs off, and again, it just sounds flat. There's not really much to it, and yeah, so let's check it out. So all right, so yeah, so that's like the intro part, and then it's got like a drop, bro. And yeah, there we go. Got to turn that off. That was the plan initially anyway, so. Right, so again, it just, everything is kind of on top of each other. It just has that green screeny feel to it. All right, the green screen effect to it, and yeah, just kind of sounds boring. All right, so let's start off. I guess we could start off here. Actually, let's start off here. Let's just add, since it's already on the track. All right, so here's the original sound, okay? And yeah, we'll just go over the convolution reverb and add it to it, okay? I'm just gonna stick with the convolution reverbs, or the impulses that come with the actual convolution reverb that comes from Ableton, and then we're going to yeah, I'm just gonna stick with those for now. All right, so there are a bunch of impulses that come with it. Okay, they should just be built in. You could just, you know, once you install it, you'll see them down here. You have the different categories, and then you have the, you know, the different items in that category. Okay, so I'm just gonna turn this off. All right, so that's kind of the lead sound, and again, it's all right. It's got no like oomph to it. It just, we can make it bigger with the reverb, right? That's another thing spatial effects do. They just make things sound bigger than they actually are. All right, so let's go with that approach. Let's make it sound bigger than it actually is, and just fill up some more space in here, right? Right. So again, there's really not much going on. We just have that one sound, and what we want to do, as EDM theory would dictate, is make it sound as big as possible. All right, so I'm putting on the convolution reverb, and basically all I'm going to do at this point is play with the dry wet. Okay, so right, so just took the dry wet down a little bit more, but what I want to do here is kind of go in and find a reverb that I like, or I'm sorry, an impulse I like, and then we're gonna go tweak it. Okay, so I'm gonna look through, and I don't want something too big. Like this thing is very big. Here you could see that it is 5.27 seconds long, so it's a bit over 5 seconds long. That's a little bit more than I like. All right, we'll talk later about how to make this shorter. But yeah, so let's go in here. I think I'm gonna go with something like maybe a digital plate. Maybe I'll start off with that, just to give it more of like a metallic kind of edge. Actually, you know what? Let's just go. We'll start with small rooms. Let's see what we got there. These are very small. You can see here it's like 0.13 seconds. I'm just gonna solo it so it's like a little bit easier to hear. Generally, I'll do it with all the music playing because I want it to fit with everything else, right? It doesn't matter if just the sound sounds good by itself, right? Because again, there's no context there. You want it to sound good in context with the song, okay? So again, for now, I'm just doing it like this just so it's easier to hear, you know, what I'm doing. All right, so these are a little bit small. Let's see if we have something like medium room, large room. We got a heavy room. I'm actually gonna go in and let's go with chambers and large rooms. All right, so that's not a bad start. Okay, it's definitely not perfect, but I think it could work. Okay, so I got this here, 3 chambers, so 3 chambers in large rooms, and this is the good old BM7 A&M chamber. All right, so let's talk about how to kind of like refine this, tweak it to our liking. All right, so right off the front, we have some different controls. Right, we have decay, size, pre-delay, and then on this side we have width, gain, dry wet. All right, so dry wet, obviously, well, hopefully you know at this point, dry wet is just the amount of the effect. Wet. All right, so wet is going to be all the way as much reverb as possible, where dry is no reverb. All right, and then you have somewhere in the middle, okay, which is, you know, like a percentage of how much reverb you're going to have. So, and then we also have width. Generally, when you see the word width on an Ableton device, it just means stereo. Okay, so right now the stereo is 100%. We'll just leave that as is for now. And then you have gain. Gain is just going to boost the actual reverb, just the reverb, not the whole sound, just the reverb. All right, so anyway, more importantly, we got a couple over here. We have decay and size. Okay, so with decay, we can change the length of this actual reverb. Okay, so what I want to do first is try to make it smaller. Okay, so let's go in, and if I have a decay like half, you can see that the length is half, right? The time is half. All right, then we also have size. Okay, size is similar to decay, but size is going to more accurately portray the room. So it's going to do things like darken based on the percentage. Like it might sound darker if you have like a smaller percentage, or it might sound brighter if you have a higher percentage, that kind of thing. All right, but again, it's similar to decay. It's basically just the size of the room, the curve, that sort of stuff. All right. Cool. So again, you can hear now that it's definitely shorter, right? And it's not as like obnoxious in my opinion. So all right, so let's go back here, do a little of this. I think it was somewhere about there. All right. Cool. So those are those controls. We're gonna come back to these as we keep moving on. All right. So let's check out the different. All right, we have these different boxes up here. Okay. So the beautiful thing is, like if we look at Ableton's reverb, and you know Ableton's stock reverb, not the hybrid reverb, the original stock reverb, that a lot of the controls are the same or similar, they just have different names. Okay, and one thing you'll find with different reverbs is that once you know one of them, they kind of all make a bit of sense. Okay, like for instance, if we compare the Ableton's algorithmic reverb, which is this one, to the convolution reverb, right? Let's just kind of go in and look at it, right? So here we have the input processing, and on the convolution reverb, we have the EQ. Okay, so what does this do? Well, basically what this does is it EQs the original sound before it goes into the reverb. Okay, very handy stuff, right? So let's just check that out real quick, and then we'll talk about how it relates to the algorithmic reverb. All right, so really depending on what kind of reverb you want to use this EQ. Okay, right? So if I want a darker sound, I would get rid of the high end. Right, you could kind of hear that when I filter out the top. I have this shelf. When I filter out the top, right, it just sounds darker, a little bit farther away, right? Now if I boost the top, it's gonna sound brighter, more in your face. A little bit too much, right? But you can hear again, it's a little bit brighter. Right? And sometimes that's what you need, right? You might have like a sample that or a sound that has a lot of like mids or low end, and you want to add some brightness to it. So again, you could do that with a reverb. Okay, and then we have also like a high pass, or it's a high shelf. And again, what this would do is it would get rid of the low end on the reverb, you know, kind of get rid of some of the mud in the sound, right? If you don't want too much mud, too much reverb on the low end, right? Generally, you don't want too much stereo information in your sub, right? So right, so I think something like that works. All right, and again, I just got rid of the lows. It's not really too noticeable, but again, there's not really much low end in the sound, so I'm just kind of doing it just because I've been trained over the years to not have stereo in the sub. So yeah, that's basically it. All right, so again, on this reverb, it would relate to this, right? So on the input, it's not as fancy, okay, but you know, it's basically the same thing. Like you could set up the same thing. So on the regular reverb, we have the input processing, and again, this is the same thing. It's a filter, okay, and all right, again, I can make it darker. I can make it brighter. right? So it's just like a little smoky, little hissy. And again, sometimes that stuff works really well. Sometimes you just need those frequencies in a song. You know, they're missing or something, and you just need a way to get those frequencies in there so you get that nice full sound. Bam, throw in a reverb. All right, so let's go back to this one, the convolution, and let's talk about this. This is a beautiful control. It's very simple, okay, and it's very effective. Okay, so what does this thing do? This is your position. Okay, so the position is basically, you could kind of position in the stereo field and three-dimensional, right? You have a three-dimensional sound stage, right? Left to right, and then front to back. This is just like a one knob thing, or two knobs. You get an XY pad here, and that lets us position where we want the reverb. We want it to sound way far back. Well, what does that do? Right? If something's far back, it's going to have more reverb. It's going to be a little bit darker. So, right? So it kind of does two things. Heavier reverb, a little bit of darkness with a filter, gentle filter. Right? So again, if I want to like lose some of the reverb on it and make it sound more up front, I just pop it up right here. And again, it just sounds more up front, less reverb, brighter reverb. Right? So again, just it's like a super knob is what I call it, like a super control, where it just does so much with just one control. Now again, the other thing you could do is you can have a lot of fun with the right and left. Right? You could do some real fun stereo stuff. You could get two convolution reverbs going, one on one side, one on the other. You could do three, one in the middle, one on the left, one on the right. Or you could just position it a little to the side, right? Like I could pan this the reverb a little to the right. I could pan the sound a little bit to the left, you know, and do some fun stuff with that. All right? But yeah, this is like a really handy control. Again, it kind of acts as like a dry wet, but it does a bit more. Okay, it's kind of like a dry wet, but also like the length of the reverb, and then also like the brightness, right? There's the further back you put it, right, there's a little less high end, where up front, more high end. Right, more high end, but less apparent. Okay, so that is the position control. Again, very nice stuff. Very nice stuff. Okay, and again, it's all based off of this sound. So you just throw in this impulse or sample, and it's just manipulating that original impulse. Okay, we're gonna skip the mod section for now. Okay, we'll get back to it later, I promise. But let's go over to damp, and then we'll talk about my favorite part, which is the shape. Okay, this is really like what I think sets this convolution reverb apart from other ones. Okay, extremely fancy stuff. Extremely fancy stuff. All right, so dampening. Okay, so dampening is just basically another EQ, another filter, however you want to look at it, or another 3 filters. Okay, and this one is a little bit different. There's more to it. Okay, but to keep it simple, we'll just say that it is a filter, or in this case an EQ, after the sound goes through the reverb. Okay, so we have this one is just the dry sound before it goes into the reverb. So basically we're like carving up the sound, cleaning up the sound, it goes into the reverb, and then once we make the reverb or create the reverb, we could kind of like EQ it out. Okay, there's, again, with dampening, there's a little bit more to it. Okay, I believe that there's it takes feedback of the reverb into account and things like that. So it's not a static EQ, but again, that's beyond the scope of this right now, right? For now, all we need to know is that, you know, it's basically a fancy filter after the reverb. Okay, so again, let's go in here and let's just start off like that. You'll notice one thing, that you'll see some of the controls I'll click and they'll turn gray. Okay, that means they're not real-time control, so you can't automate them. Okay, so again, if you try to or map them to a MIDI knob, they're offline and they're not real-time, so you just got to kind of drag them and then, you know, wait till it updates. All right, so let's see. Let's just look real quick, see if there's any questions, anything like that. Nothing. All right, so again, what I'm going to do here is go in and, right, just darken the output. Right, so to me, again, it sounds a little bit smoother. If I wanted some more highs in there, I could do something like this. Right, but again, really what I should do at this point is actually bring in let me let this play out a little longer so it doesn't get too boring. All right, so let's check it out. Let's do an A and a B. A little bit dark. Right, so here it is with it. Here it is without it. Right, so again, even though we're not done, you know, it definitely sounds like it fits a lot better. All right, even though we're not finished with it, it definitely sounds like it fits a lot better. All right. All right, so yeah, so that's where we are at this point. I think it adds something. Like I said, we're not really done with it yet. And yeah, so we just finished the dampening section. And if we were to look at the algorithmic reverb, this right here is your dampening section. Right, so this section and this section basically do similar things. All right, one really handy thing on Ableton devices, if you ever see this kind of background, right, you can see it's similar to things like, right, if you look at the spectrum analyzer or the EQ, right? So anytime you see this, if you're new to Ableton or, you know, whatnot, this just means that it has to do with frequencies, right? So whatever this control is has to do with frequencies. Okay, same thing with this one, same thing with this one, same thing with that one. So again, it's kind of a giveaway. Okay, so one of the things I love about Ableton is that different things, you know, different controls or things kind of have a function to it. It's not just like, you know, a picture of a guitar effect or whatever like that. It kind of, you know, has a function to it. Okay, and there's like a language of Ableton. So anyway, yeah, so anytime you see this, this has to do with frequencies. And again, we could see it. No, not really. Kind of, sort of. But anyway, so yeah, anyway, the point was that this here diffusion is similar to the dampening network. All right, and the reason I'm showing you these different things is just so that, you know, you could be comfortable with different reverbs. All right, because again, once you kind of learn one, it's all downhill from there. All right, cool. So in the dampening, and let's move over to shape. Okay, and again, like I said, this is one of the things that I really like about the Convolution Reverb. Okay, this is kind of my favorite section, and let's get into it. Okay, so what does this section actually do? Well, this is kind of like you can edit the sample. Let's look at it like that. All right, you could do a little bit more, but you can also edit the sample. All right, you can also do things like your early reflections. We'll get into that. Cascade, it's just going to kind of make the reverb more full. right? And then you can reverse it where it gets really crazy. Again, fade in, fade out. So let's check it out. So what I want to do here is I want to go in and I want to edit this thing. Okay, so first thing I want to do is let's try reverse. Okay, and what's going to happen is I probably should have picked a different one to do this, but yeah, anyway. So first thing we could do, so if I reverse it now, right? Sounds really cool, but it takes a little while for the thing to kick in. Okay, so let's flip it back around and let's just take down the length. All right, so this control kind of tweaks the length. All right, so let's check it out. Right, so things like this I like a lot. I like really short reverbs, and this allows you to do that. It's a little bit different than the decay control, because the decay control decays gradually, where this one is kind of just a quick cut. All right, so you could kind of hear it fills up the sound, right? It makes the thing sound bigger without really taking up too much of the, too much of the space, right? So it's kind of like it's bigger, but it gives back some space. It's basically like artificially big at this point. All right, so but now the beauty is we could hit reverse, okay, and since it's shorter, it starts right off with the reverb. Okay, so I'm just kind of like timing it out right here, all right, to try to, get it to match. So it's a little bit of like playing with the length, and I can play with the decay, that kind of stuff here. Cool. So I'm kind of digging what's going on with this. Okay, so let's move over back here. Okay, and let's play around with the pre-delay. All right, so what's pre-delay? Well, pre-delay is the time that the sound goes into the reverb, and then the time it takes for the reverb to generate the reverb, right? So it's basically just a delay before the reverb sets in. Okay, so I could give it like a little bit of a delay, or a lot. Let's do like something big so you could kind of hear where I'm going with this. So I guess it goes up to 200 milliseconds to start there. So again, it's basically, you're gonna hear the sound, there's gonna be a delay, and then you're gonna hear the reverb. All right, and again, this is more getting into the special effects territory, but again, that's why I really like this particular device. Right, so now you could hear it. It's definitely like decoupled from the sound, right? So here's it forward. Let's hear it in context. All right, cool. So I kind of like what's going on. It definitely adds more to it. The pre-delay is a little long. It's not really in sync. Here it is without. right? So I think that adds a nice amount, okay, to the sound, right? It's still not perfect. We'll get there, okay? So one thing to me is that now there's a little bit too much high end. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out some of the highs. Because basically what I want to do is I want to make the reverb more apparent, but I want to kind of get rid of some of the highs because the highs are kind of, I don't know, they're just kind of confusing in there, right? A little too metallic as well. All right, there's also like if you're, so I think that sounds good. Let's check it out in context. Curious to hear how it sounds. Sounds cool forward too. Kind of like it, it's got a little bit more of a bounce to it when we got it reversed, so I'm gonna stick with that, but you know, feel free to do whatever you like. All right, so yeah, let's see what time we got. Now, one thing I want to mention is that there are, like with the pre-delay, you could kind of hear I was doing it by ear, which usually I do, and also just to save time, but I'm actually gonna go back now and talk about, there's like BPM to millisecond converters online, right? So I could just, let's see, BPM to, there we go, right? So I think I'm at like 103, and let's just type in 103. All right, and then this tells me like the delay intervals. So what do we got here? Where's like eighth note? Eighth note, 291, 14. So if I put in 145.6, that's going to be a 16th note delay. All right. Oh. So let's just put that in 145.6. Got to be exact, people. All right. So let's check it out. Let's see if it sounds any different. Yeah, it's cool. Yeah, it definitely sounds cleaner. All right, and then again, if I wanted it to be like a 30-second note delay, I would just go half of that, so it would be like, what, 73? So let's try that. 0.3. I like that as well. It kind of has more like a halo effect on top of it. Like it just sounds like this nice halo on top of the sound. All right. So let's see where we are. All right, let's do another example. I think that's good for now. Basically, the idea is I want to kind of go over all the different controls in here. Obviously, you have fade in, fade out. Now, the thing is when it's reversed, it does the opposite. Okay, so like real quick. So fade out is going to fade in, right? Because the sample's reversed. All right, I don't know if that's like an oversight or just the way it works. But again, so if you wanted it, you know, like I said, it just kind of cuts out abruptly. That's what I like about it, you know, when you reverse the sound. But if you wanted to add a little fade out, obviously use the fade in. All right. All right, cool. So yeah, we got time. Let's just do another example. Let's just check it out in context. Right now, I'm gonna go and like tweak the different things. Right, it definitely needs some EQ at this point. Oh. Right, so I think I would probably right? So again, definitely adds, you know, makes it sound bigger, more spacious, more realistic, more alive, and, you know, yeah. So I would even probably add another reverb after this, just like a subtle, longer reverb, right? Very subtle, but a bit longer, maybe like decay time of like 1.5 seconds, something like that. Very subtle though. All right. So any questions on any of that? All right. So let's try one more. Let's just go something simple. Let's try this one. All right, so we got this little cute little melody. All right, so let's go in. I'm pretty sure I took the reverb off of this thing. Reverb is off. All we have is chorus. Okay, so, and no reverb. Beautiful. All right, so let's go in and let's do the same thing. We're gonna go over this one a little quicker since we already went over the controls. All right, but again, I just wanted to kind of poke out a little more. I want it to sound more realistic. I don't want it to sound too big because we also have this one coming in. All right, the bro melody. Bro melody comes in, so we don't need it to sound too big. You know what I'm saying? All right, so let's find the old convolution. Nope. Yeah, you don't don't ever just search here. All results convolution reverb. Yeah, it's not fun. Definitely not fun. All right. Yeah, so this one again, I wanted to like thinking about the strategy, right? It's always good to think of strategies and stuff like that. I just want to add a little space to it. Nothing quite as with as much manipulation as I did with the lead. This is going to be more of a straightforward reverb, all right? Like a lot of times with something like this, I just like load something up, go through the presets. Okay, that sounds cool. Tweak it a little bit and then go. Right? That's definitely not what I want. Let's find like, I like these rooms. I wish there was like a medium. You know what I'm saying? Like, all right, so chambers, large rooms. Maybe there's a medium in here. Again, we can always like tweak the size and decay, but it's still gonna have that feel of a larger reverb. Like if we load up a large reverb, tweak the size and the decay, you know, it's still gonna kind of sort of have that feel of a large reverb, right? Let's see, bright strings. That's kind of dope. There we go. All right, so I like where this is. The length is cool, right? The decay time is cool. My only beef is that it's a little bit bright, okay? So I'm just gonna go in here, right? Like we have this super knob, and we're gonna play with this. Something like that isn't bad. It's not, you know, it's not perfect, but again, you could kind of hear. Right? Just the subtlety gives it a little bit more of a realistic kind of sound. All right, so let's go in, right? We're here to talk about the convolution reverb, so let's kind of go in, get a little bit more dirty with this thing. So again, all I did at this point is go in with the position and the EQ, all right? And I'm gonna get rid of the bass, right? I'm going back to the EQ and I'm getting rid of a little bit of the bass. Might even make it a little bigger. Right now, the one really cool thing about this is that it's kind of like a sampler, right? Like when you have a sampler, you could just set up a bunch of controls and then you just kind of throw new samples in there and come up with something completely different. We could kind of do the same thing here, right? So I could just go in. That's cool, right? See, right off the bat, I'm like, yeah, that's. All right, so let's remember this name, TVCC Bright Theater. Kind of nice too. Let's hear this in context. This is nice. It just gives it like a little pop out kind of effect. I think it was this one. Right here. Yeah. Let's check this out. So yeah, I'm gonna stick with this one. I kind of like it. Kind of feels good. Feeling good with this one, and that's about it. We can play around with the shape a little bit. We can play around with some of these controls. Some of the ones I didn't talk about. All right. So right here we have the early reflections, and then again here we have the cascade. So basically, what early reflections are like if you think about the way sound travels. Right, like basically I'm talking now. It doesn't matter where I'm in this room. I have like a small room, and right, it takes time to travel. Okay, so early reflections is basically like the time it takes. It's basically the first time the sound starts hitting a wall or whatever, a surface. Okay, so basically it's like the first time the sound hits the surface. Okay, and then you have the diffusion network. Okay, and the diffusion is basically when it starts, reflecting off all the different walls, all the different things like that. So early reflection is just that initial, and then diffusion is basically all the other things. And you kind of have cascade, kind of works like a diffusion network, but for now, we'll talk about the early reflections. All right. Basically, like the takeaway is it kind of has a chorusy sound to it, right? It's kind of like a chorusy kind of effect, all right? Like if you ever use the Ableton Chorus, what does a chorus do? It kind of just makes duplicates and, just moves them in time and maybe in the stereo field, maybe detunes them, that kind of thing. So it's got that chorusy kind of sound. Right? I don't really notice too much. It basically just sounds like it's a little bit more oomphy in the initial part of the reverb. All right, see if you can notice that. Right? With the early reflections up high, it sounds a little smoother, right? It's kind of a more continuous reverb. With them low, it sounds like it just kind of like shoots up into the I guess the diffusion part. Right? Can't decide, so I'm just gonna put it somewhere around here. It's good enough, right? Can't nitpick too much. All right, so again, that's the early reflections. Cascade. It's kind of weird. It's like a feedback kind of effect. Yeah, I don't think it's really working in this situation. You could hear it's kind of like a hummy feedback kind of thing. Sometimes it works. It's weird. Sometimes it's just like, oh. Sometimes it works. All right. So, yeah. one thing we didn't talk about, let me get into this real quick, is the modulation section. Okay, and basically what this is, it's an LFO. Right? If you know an LFO, it's just something that kind of changes something over time. Okay, this LFO changes this number over time. Okay, and so basically you have like a rate and an amount. Okay, so what is modulation in reverb do? Okay, and again, it just kind of gives it a like some movement to the sound. All right, like let's now that it's on, let me crank this up. Right, you could hear it, again, it also gives it like a chorusy kind of sound, you could notice. Right, you could hear it's kind of like a shimmery sort of thing. Right, almost like it's rotating. Okay, now what's the point of adding this? Okay, well, in reverb theory, or from what I've read about reverbs and things like that, the idea behind the modulation is, say you're trying to create certain spaces, right? So say you're trying to create like a cathedral or a church or like a cave. What the modulation does is it's supposed to help emulate all those like little nooks and crannies, right? So if you're talking about like a church, you know, it really depends on like the shape of the church, but you know, sometimes you go into a church, or you know, whatever your preferred type of religious gathering places, and you know, you'll have like a little tower on one, you know, it'll just be like auditorium style, and then you have like a tower on one side, and then there'll be a little room off to the side. Anyway, the modulation is supposed to kind of emulate those kind of things. All right, just like little nooks, or like say you're in a cavern and there's all these like little nooks, like there might be a little tunnel this way or that way. It just kind of you know, helps create something similar to those. All right, me, I just try it. I don't know about all that. I just try it, and if I think it sounds cool, I go with it. Like here, I think it sounds cool because again, it kind of gives it a shimmer, kind of a chorus. Right, it's kind of like wah, 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 wah. So yeah, I kind of like it. I'm gonna leave it there. Now let's play it in context. It's a little bit much, so let's take this down a bit. Right, so I think something like that works. Again, just subtle. I don't want it to be screaming reverb. I just want it subtle. Again, just to take away some of that artificialness of the sound. Right, so when I turn this on, it feels like this sound, you know, struggling less to kind of fit together. All right, again, it's very subtle, but you know, you do that with every track and it adds up. So yeah, so that's a little bit on the Convolution Reverb Pro. Okay, like I said, this is one of my favorite reverbs out there. I know, I don't know if that matters, but like, meaning I use this thing all the time. I love it. The new hybrid reverb is awesome as well. But the beauty about this one is just all the like really comes down to this page and, you know, this super page right here. It just, and then you got the decay and the size. You have those on the hybrid reverb, but you know, just all these things working together in harmony, in unison, just really does it for me. Okay. Gonna be honest, I don't really use the damp too much. Like now that we're done, and I don't really use this too much. I think it sounds kind of weird. If I need to filter it, I'll just throw it in a rack and throw like a EQ on it. You know, make a dry wet rack, throw an EQ on it, because yeah, this something I feel is not right with it, but whatever. So I don't really use this too much. That's why when I was playing with it, I'm like, oh. Anyway, yeah, look. So I hope you enjoy this here video. Okay, one thing, let me just back up. So again, I think I did this, but yeah. So what I would say to do is these here. I love these impulses. It's Simplicity Bricasti M7. Okay, just search that, Simplicity Bricasti. Put that in the chat. Oh. All right. So if you do this, all right, just search for those and grab them. They're beautiful sounding convolution reverbs. It's basically a it's basically someone, it's not real spaces. It's basically like a very expensive hardware unit. Okay. And what someone did is they, you know, recorded the reverbs from it and turned them into impulses, and we could use them in the Convolution Reverb Pro. Okay. So again, you get this like very expensive sound right in your computer for free, right? How can you say no to that? Anyway, so definitely check that out, right? Again, I could throw something in there like this. I just dragged the sample in. Let's see. Still sounds cool. Yeah. And I could always undo that, all right, which is very handy. All right, so anyway, hope you enjoyed that. That is a little bit on the Convolution Reverb Pro, okay? Next time, we're going to get into some more spatial stuff. Probably get into the echo. Same kind of style, just break the whole thing down, add it to music. Maybe I'll just keep this and just kind of like keep it going, just so we could, and then I'll bounce before. Like I'll do a before and after, just so we could kind of just keep hearing, you know, the improvement or whatever, or the change. We'll just call it a change. All right. So yeah, for next week, I want to go over the echo effect. And that's another one. That's another one of my favorite ones. The echo effect, the one that comes with Ableton, pretty much replaced all my purchase delays. Yeah, I still use some other delays, but I like that one a lot. And yeah, we'll jump into that. Also, I want to get into the hybrid reverb and then also the spectral delay. Is that what it's called? They changed it. It was like transmuter, spectral time. Okay, so we'll get into that one too. That one's sick, especially for like vocals, this kind of thing. Super fun, super experimental. Yeah. Anyway, thank you for stopping by. Again, my name is Michael Hatzes, aka Bangclude, aka Mikey Bang Bang, here with Garnish Music Production, coming at you live from Brooklyn, New York. And right, if you liked it, make sure subscribe, hit that like button, the bell. You know the drill on YouTube, right? Gotta say it. And definitely check back for the next streams coming up from Garnish. All right. Thanks a lot. Take care. Have a great day.